Hare श्री प्रहलाद महाराज की जय, श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय, निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे।
Hare Krishna devotees.
Hare Krishna.
How are you doing? Are we okay?
Yes.
Right, here we go. Oi, oi. Right, here we go. Here we really go. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
ISKCON Svandracharya Srila Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
Grantaraj Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki,
Jai.
Shri Shri Radharatnath ki,
Jai.
Shri Shri Panchatattva ki,
Jai.
Shri Nrsingadev Bhagavan ki,
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki,
Jai.
Sankirtan Yajna ki,
Jai.
ISKCON Newcastle Yatra ki,
Jai.
Gaur Premanande.
Jai.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Krishna.
All glories to the assembled
Hare
devotees.
Krishna.
All glories to the assembled
Hare
devotees.
Krishna.
All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Is this loud enough, or should we turn it up a bit, or is it okay?
Okay.
What do you really? Oh, Sival said turn it up. So if everybody else said it's okay, we should turn it up. Can we turn it up? Who's the expert? Haribol, Haribol. Oh, that's okay. Is that okay, Sival? Okay, it's okay. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda
Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda
Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda
Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda
Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
So Hare Krishna devotees, I'm just so happy again to be with you this evening, and yes, we have a very interesting topic this evening, and it's just a really wonderful, rich and beautiful topic, which is the value of association, basically. the value of association and serving together and being in the company of other devotees and appreciating other devotees and this sort of idea. It's just really nice. Oh, and I wanted to compliment our young singer. That was you, wasn't it? How old are you?
26.
26? Well, okay. That was nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's just wonderful coming. Last night we heard this beautiful kirtan coming. Radha that's just going for it. And what's your name?
Kavish Prabhu.
Kavish. And we came in this evening, we heard Kavish.
There's Radha Shyam's son.
Oh, well that explains it. No, that's very nice, like father, like son. But it's nice to see so much devotional talent here in Newcastle. I've been coming here for years. I cannot remember exactly when was the first time, but it was in the 80s. It was in the 80s sometime, so it means, I don't know, 30 odd years thereabouts ago. And watching ISKCON Newcastle step by step developing nicely in terms of nice facility we have already, and the temple project coming fairly soon. But then there's also the development of the devotees, the people. In a sense, that's the main type of development, really. Because what's a temple? What's a yatra without devotees? And it's a sign of spiritual health that there are more devotees coming, and the existing devotees are developing. And we see that. So, yes, in that regard then, I'm going to read a verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela chapter 22, the process of devotional service. And I'm going to read verse 55. And this is actually Lord Chaitanya speaking to Sanatana Goswami. And it's about association, of course. The value of association. And in fact, Lord Chaitanya here is quoting a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. And this particular verse, well, let me just read it and then I'll tell you an interesting point about this verse. Tuliyama levenapi naswargam napunar bhavam bhagavat sangi sangasya martyanam kim utashisha. Translation: the value of a moment's association with a devotee of the Lord cannot be compared even to the attainment of the heavenly planets or liberation from matter. And what to speak of worldly benedictions in the form of material prosperity, which is for those who are meant for death. And let me just tell you this interesting little point, is that this particular verse, it's First Canto, chapter 18, I think verse 13, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, 1:18:13. But devotees, listen to this. The same verse appears verbatim in the fourth canto. offhand I can't tell you the exact verse number, but it's there. I just was looking this evening or this afternoon. And so in other words, it's repeated. The verse is repeated verbatim, letter, word for word, letter for letter. The same verse. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, it is extremely rare to find verses which are repeated. There is, you could say, an economy of verses, very economical use. And even, just for example, interesting example, in the 9th canto of the story of Lord Ram, in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's mention of how Sita was kidnapped, and then how Lord Ram lamented. He lamented. Oh, but there's one or maybe two verses or a couple of verses saying that yes, Lord Ram lamented, and it was very intense. In Ramayana, there is, again I forget the exact number, but there's something like approximately 5 chapters. It's just Lord Ram lamenting and lamenting and lamenting. And then after that he laments. Oh gosh, just again and again and again. It must be at least a couple of hundred verses or more. So the same thing, which is extremely profound, the lamentation of Lord Ram and separation, oh, that is very profound. But the same thing in Srimad Bhagavatam is maybe a couple of verses. In other words, there's an economy of language. And, you may find this interesting or even slightly amusing, perhaps. In the 10th canto, there is the story of Lord Krishna fighting with a demon named Paundraka, who basically disguised himself to look like Krishna. And he dressed himself up like Krishna. He had, the symbols, the club, the disc, and so on. He looked like Krishna. So, the speaker, Shukadev Goswami, he speaks one verse there that there was a demon named Paundraka, and he was such a nonsense, such a rascal, that he tried to present himself like Krishna. Then a few verses later in the same chapter, it's maybe half a dozen or so verses later, there's a verse in which he kind of repeats, not word for word, but he basically states the same thing, that there was this demon, Paundraka, who was such a rascal that he made himself look like Krishna. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that in Srimad Bhagavatam, because Srimad Bhagavatam is presented, things are presented very succinctly, like in a nutshell, not with expanded language, like Ramayana, like Mahabharata. There's a lot of lengthy descriptions, like I mentioned of Lord Ram, his lamentation. But so Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Srimad Bhagavatam, to find a verse repeated is just, it's amazing. It means that the point which is being repeated is so important that it got repeated. Otherwise, so many important things they just stated once in Srimad Bhagavatam. But that was repeated. And if you want to hear something that's sort of a little amusing, he says, in a very small book like Srimad Bhagavatam, which is presenting so much, but it's just a small book. It's only something 18,000 verses. To find a repeated verse is like, you got to think now, why was that repeated? It must be special. So I hope you got that. That's, when I read that first, I thought, wow, that's just an amazing point. So this verse is repeated verbatim. First canto, chapter 18, verse 13, and then somewhere in the fourth canto, which means it's really very important. It really, really is. It's outstandingly important. In fact, it's so important, I'm going to read the translation again. The value of a moment's association with a devotee of the Lord cannot be compared even to the attainment of the heavenly planets or liberation from matter, and what to speak of worldly benedictions in the form of material prosperity, which is for those who are meant for death. Yes. So there's a short purport here in Chaitanya Charitamrita. In the Bhagavatam, where the verse appears twice, Prabhupada gives longer purports. But let me just read this. It looks like it's 3 sentences. This is a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam 1:18-13. This verse concerns the Vedic rites and sacrifices performed by the great sages of Naimisharanya, headed by Shonaka Rishi. The sages pointed out that association with a devotee for even less than a second is beyond comparison to 1,000 Vedic rituals and sacrifices, elevation to heavenly planets, or merging into the existence of the Supreme. Yeah, so there you go, devotees. That's just, little introduction to the idea of the value of association, the beneficial effect of association, and, it should be an inspiration for us that we should take association. I mean, just on that point, here's an interesting, it might be it's kind of an unusual point that Prabhupada made one time, but it also refers to the idea of association. Prabhupada once was giving a class somewhere in America, and Srila Prabhupada asked the devotees to answer a question. And it seemed like, just a very strange question. Would you believe Srila Prabhupada asked the devotees, who is God? How's that for a question? For devotees, people who are already practicing for some time and have read so much literature about Krishna consciousness, but Prabhupada asked, who is God? And the devotees were sort of taken aback. And then, of course, one devotee put his hand up and said, Krishna! And you know what Prabhupada said? No. Prabhupada said, no, Krishna is not God. Prabhupada said, Radha Krishna is God. Radha Krishna. Yes. Krishna association. Krishna, Prabhupada said many, many times, Krishna is never alone. If you ever see a picture of Krishna and he is alone, then at least in the vast majority of cases, it will not be authentic. Yeah. You know, sometimes you get these pictures, paintings, or, you know, prints of Krishna, and behind Krishna is the Om sign. You know, well, Hindi or Sanskrit Om, and Krishna's in front. Have you seen a picture like that before? You must have. This picture, we would say, is not authentic, because it indicates Krishna is coming from the Om. So the Om is like the source, and Krishna now has come from that. But no, Krishna is the source of the Om. He's the source of everything. Om means the spiritual nature, and Krishna is the source of that. So that's not authentic. And pictures of Krishna where, you know, he's alone, at least, you know, preferably there should be Srimati Radharani. If not, at least there should be a cow or a peacock, you know, like this, like kind of prominent, not just way off in the back somewhere, but with Krishna, because Krishna's never alone. Krishna likes to get the association of the devotees. So Radha Krishna is God. And we chant Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Generally, we don't just chant Krishna, 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 Krishna. I mean, it's, you know, you can if you really want, but Hare Krishna, that's actually what we chant. And Hare Krishna means Radha Krishna. Yes. So association is really such a prominent thing. I mean, important thing and prominent thing in Krishna consciousness. And do you think we need this heater on? It's almost at a tropical level.
Turn the gas.
Close the gas.
Close the gas.
Here's the expert.
You got to close it at the back.
Ah, look at that. The expert. Prabhu. So there we were. Right, the value of association, the importance that we should try to be in the association of devotees all the time if we can, or at least as much as we can. Yeah. So, now there's a verse in the same chapter actually, Madhya Lila, Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 22, again spoken by Lord Chaitanya himself, in which he explains or lists out the 5 most significant or important, you could say, devotional practices. He lists out 64 actually altogether, but the last 5, they're especially important. And this is what they are. This is the verse. Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavat Shravan, Mathura Vas, Sri Murtir Shradaya Sevan. Beautiful verse. 5 exceptionally important activities. Sadhu Sangha, the association of devotees. Nama Kirtan, the chanting of the holy names. Bhagavat Shravan, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, or just hearing transcendental literatures and transcendental descriptions and discussions like that. Then Mathura Vas literally means living in Mathura, but in a broader sense means living in a sacred place. And, you know, if you're living in Newcastle, that would mean making your house into a sacred place by having nice pictures of Krishna and, you know, not having just pictures of just a bowl of flowers or what's his name, Shah Rukh Khan, you know, or something miscellaneous, but having pictures of Krishna. And instead of watching television in the evening when you come home from work or school or whatever, instead of watching the television, having an evening program like this in your home. And instead of just eating ordinary food, eating nice, cooking, preparing nice vegetarian food, offering that to the Lord on your altar at home, and serving to the family members nice Krishna prasadam. This is Mathura Vas, or an application of the principle, at least, of Mathura Vas. Living in Mathura, or living in a place like Mathura. And then Sri Murtir, Shradaya Seva, Sri Murti, the deity form of the Lord. Shradaya Seva, serving with faith. Yes. I mean, like this, the altar here, there we have the nice pictures. They're also considered murtis, even though they're not actually, you know, like carved physical figures, but they're present there. Radha Radhanath are present there with you. The Panchatattva there. On this side, Lord Nrsingadev's there with Prahlad on the other side. And then the Parampara, the members of the disciplic succession, they're all there. So this is part of Sri Murtir, Shradaya Sevan. Of course, you know, in due course, when you all have got together and built the beautiful new temple, which is just now coming. No, not just now, but coming shortly. Then you can, when there's enough of you who are trained and practiced in the worship of like physical deities, like in Radha Radhanath Temple, or like in Peter Maritzburg, our ISKCON temple in Phoenix, Johannesburg. Yeah, then, you know, we can have deities like that installed here, and you can serve them. So, you know, there's an interesting point in regard to this particular verse. Sadhu Sangha Nama Kirtan Bhagavat Shravan Mathura Vasri Murtir Shradaya Sevan. The first point mentioned is Sadhu Sangha, the association of devotees. And then Nama Kirtan, chanting the holy names. The thing is, though, that if we consider carefully these five, beginning with sadhu sangha, the association of devotees, if you think about them, then you see how each of the other four, they're enriched by including sadhu sangha with them. For example, kirtan, Nama Kirtan is the second one, chanting the holy names. So, we had this nice kirtan last night, and there was this nice kirtan just now. I think it would be very difficult to have such a nice kirtan on your own. Now, you can have a one-person kirtan, and some devotees do, they definitely do. I've done many times when I've been traveling on my own. To have a one-person kirtan is possible. Even if you learn the tricks, you know what you can do? You can play cartels with one hand. You put the one cartel down on something, and then you play it with your one hand. And with the mridanga, you just hit the big end with one hand, and it's better than nothing. But it's so much nicer to have kirtan with a nice group of devotees. It's just so much nicer. It's completely another world altogether. And even chanting japa, which is also Nama Kirtan. Chanting japa, before COVID I used to travel a lot and visit different yatras, different cities where there are groups of devotees and different places around the world. And I would always invite the devotees to come and chant japa with me in the morning. And many would come. And I would find it, sitting on an airplane chanting japa, well, again, it's better than nothing. It's better than not chanting japa, but it's just not really very nice. But when you're in a nice atmosphere with other devotees, then chanting japa becomes a great pleasure, actually. And what to speak of having a kirtan like, with instruments and everything, and with Radha Shyam Das Prabhu leading the kirtan. Is he the best kirtan leader here, would you say? Radha Govinda Prabhu?
Four. We've got a group of best.
Oh, we got a group of best. Wow. The opulence of this Newcastle. So anyway, that's the first point. The kirtan, chanting of the holy names, is really enriched when there's association, as opposed to just you doing it yourself. So Nama Kirtan, the next one is Bhagavat Shravan, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And you can read Prabhupada's books yourself, and it's good, and Prabhupada instructed we should all read his books. But when you get together with devotees and you really share understandings, or in a group you get together with a senior devotee and you hear like a higher level of explanation of Krishna consciousness, then it's better. It's better than just doing it on your own. Although doing it on your own is also very nice. I remember many years ago, 1991, I went to Vrindavan and listened to seminars in the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education. And there was one seminar by Giriraj Maharaj. I'm sure some of you have seen Maharaj or heard of him. It was, Nectar of Devotion, and there was like 25 or maybe 30 of us. And I had already read Nectar of Devotion something like maybe 4 or 5 times, probably about 5 times. So I thought, Nectar of Devotion, sure, I know Nectar of Devotion. I read it 5 times, of course I know it. But we went through it with Giriraj Maharaj, a much more developed and advanced devotee, and with discussions and different points raised by the other devotees, and it was just amazing. And when we finished, after a month, I felt like I'd never read Nectar of Devotion before. It was just such a revelation. It was wonderful. So again, that's the principle of association. And then what's the next one? Mathura Vas. Living in a place, or it can include visiting a place, just staying for a while in a place which is sacred, like Vrindavan, or Navadvip, Mayapur, these places. If you go in the association of devotees, particularly the association of devotees who know these sacred places and who can, take you around and help you to enter into, in a deeper spiritual way, those sacred places, it's so much better than just going on your own, particularly when you don't really know anything about it. Sometimes devotees go on their own, they've never been to these places, and they're in some special place, but they don't even know where they are. They don't even know this is Govardhan Hill, or they don't know what to do in these places. Like I remember once, there was a group of us, there was probably, I don't know, anyway, some number of us. We were doing a Govardhan Parikrama, and there was one young man with us who'd never been there before, ever. A real beginner. And he just didn't know anything practically about Krishna consciousness. So at one place, nice place, we sat down and we were chanting near the hill, and we noticed this young fellow had disappeared. He was just not there. And we're looking around and wondering what happened to this fellow. And then we heard some sort of, what would you say, like branches breaking or some noises coming from on the hill, about 25 meters up the hill. And we looked up, and there he was, up on the hill. He didn't know that you don't go on Govardhan Hill. He just didn't know. And so we called him down, come down, what were you doing there? And you know what he told us? I don't even know if I should tell you. But he was obeying the call of nature. Oh, Krishna, on Govardhan Hill. Oh my Lord. This sort of thing can happen. If not, that's pretty extreme. But if not that, some sort of variation on that type of thing can happen. If you don't go in association of those who can help you. And Srimurtiya's Shradaya Sevan, the deity, when the devotees, well, when you've got, well, even an altar like this too, when the devotees decorate the altar nicely, and decorate like in the Radharadhanath temple in Durban, the deities are so beautifully dressed and decorated, it's just completely entrancing. That's otherwise the deities, if you just have the deities on their own with nothing, it's not the same as the deities very beautifully presented, which is a reflection of the devotion of the devotees who dressed them and decorated them. So that's also sadhu sangha. It's an element, an aspect of sadhu sangha, or the association of the devotees. Therefore, this point of association is kind of all-pervasive in Krishna consciousness, and it enriches Krishna consciousness in so many ways. So therefore, we should always try to appreciate other devotees, even if there's another devotee who's not exactly your style of devotee. Some devotees are very quiet, and some other devotees are very loud, or something like that. Different devotees have different natures. And if you're very quiet, but another devotee is really loud, then you may feel, gosh, he's a bit too much for me, and I don't want to be around him. So, every devotee, of course, is an individual. Everyone has their natures. But with devotees, the first thing is they are devotees. And we should appreciate them first as devotees. And then other details of their natures and so on, they're secondary. And in this way, we can be happy in the association of any devotees. I remember the first time I went to the former Soviet Union, I went to one place, one city where there's a temple. First time, it was 1993. And they spoke Russian. And I did not know a word of Russian language. And they did not know a word of English. I didn't even know yes or no. Yes, no, very good. Prabhupada told the story of the man in India who only knew in English, yes, no, very good. This may be a slight diversion, actually. So someone at work, someone stole something. Not him, but someone stole something, and the police came and they were trying to figure out who stole it. So they interviewed this man. These are English people, English speakers. And so they asked this man, and this man liked to show off that he spoke some English. Yes, no, and very good. So they asked him, "Did you steal that?" He said, "Yes." And they said, "Well, are you going to give it back?" "No." "Well, then we'll have to arrest you." "Very good." I told that story. Anyway, that's a diversion, but I didn't even know that. So we could not communicate other than sign language. And sign language is not easy. So we couldn't communicate, literally. But we were really happy together. just being devotees. It was really interesting. It was a little frustrating, but it wasn't really frustrating. It was very satisfying to be in the company of the devotees. So we should appreciate the devotees, and if another devotee is, got a different nature from your nature, then maybe you won't want to associate closely and, spend a lot of time with that person if they're really something really different from you, because birds of a feather flock together. That also applies in Krishna consciousness. But at least we should be able to appreciate the other devotees for their being devotees. Yes, and then you'll always be happy in the association of the devotees. So yes, these are some thoughts on association. We should try and make the most of association. We should try to be good association. Trying to be good association. Here's an example. Listen to this. If I was going to be here longer, I'd test you on this. That the next time you meet one of the other devotees, instead of just, the typical South African, how are you? Which is okay, but it's very South African. If you're in Russia and you ask someone in Russian, how are you? They'll look at you like, what are you talking about? They just don't, like in India, they don't say please. And if you're in India, North India, right? They don't use the word kripaya. They don't use it somehow or other. They want something, they just ask, give me this. And they don't say please. So instead of just saying, how are you? Why don't you say, you know what? Yesterday or last night, I was reading such and such from Bhagavad Gita, and it was really interesting. And I thought I'd just tell you, and then you can tell them a little bit what you read. And you can start a Krishna conscious discussion. What do you think? I think it's a good idea. Next time you sit down for prasadam, if you sit down for prasadam after the Sunday program, sit down next to just someone and just start a discussion like that. This is Krishna consciousness. This is Krishna consciousness. To talk about Krishna, to share about Krishna together. And this really enriches our association. And it makes association a really transformative thing. So there you go, devotees. These are a few thoughts on the subject. And let me just read the verse again, and then I see we have a few questions, so we'll have a look at them. The value of a moment's association with a devotee of the Lord cannot be compared even to the attainment of the heavenly planets or liberation from matter, and what to speak of worldly benedictions in the form of material prosperity, which are for those who are meant for death. Yes. And hopefully we'll never have such a sort of attitude in our minds that if there's some devotee who's really different and we think, for us they're strange or something like that. And then when we see them, we think, oh no, it's him again. It's a bad sign. You know what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says? I don't even know if I should tell you because it's so drastic. That if you see a devotee and you think, oh no, and you just really you would much rather avoid that devotee. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, if you feel like that, you're already a resident of hell. That's a bit drastic, isn't it? Anyway, Hare Krishna. Let me have a look at these questions here. We got 7. Wow, listen to this. How can we be free from the entanglement of Maya? Well, here's a suggestion. Associate with devotees who are free from the entanglement of Maya. How's that? Because whoever you associate with, you'll become like them. Yeah. If you associate with materialists, you'll become a materialist. And in fact, Prabhupada made the point, if you associate with thieves, you'll become a thief. If you associate with drunkards, you'll become a drunkard. Yeah. But if you associate with devotees, you'll become a devotee. So, right, in this verse, does the term devotee refer to a devotee of Krishna, or could devotee refer to other worshippers? No. This refers to devotees of Krishna, devotees of the Lord. Devotees of the Lord. Bhagavat Sangi. Bhagavat. Bhagavat means a devotee of the Lord. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't refer to devotees like demigod worshippers or impersonalists. Doesn't refer to them. So yesterday we spoke about spontaneous devotional service being a very advanced level. Prabhupada said that service should be voluntary and self-motivated. What is the difference between what Prabhupada describes and spontaneous devotional service? Well, if you read Nectar of Devotion, should I ask who has read Nectar of Devotion? Or better not. We have 1. We have 2. I think we have a few, but maybe not so many. In Nectar of Devotion, you see that chapters 15 and 16, those 2 chapters, they're about spontaneous, their title, Spontaneous Devotional Service. And what is being referred to as spontaneous devotional service there is not just, enthusiastic devotional service as we know it. Just like, yeah, let's have a kirtan. Yeah, great. Not just like that. It's something different. Spontaneous devotional service, the way the term is used by Srila Prabhupada, means it's referring to the devotional service performed by the inhabitants of Goloka Vrindavan in the kingdom of God, those devotees. Because there, they, generally speaking, they don't know that Krishna is God. They think he's just one of the boys from the village. Yeah, they love him. They think like that because they love him so much that their love just obscures the fact that he's God. This big, grand person who's just the big authority, and you just got to bow down before him and like that. So like the cowherd boys, they think he's our friend. He's our friend. Why should we bow down to him? He's our friend. But they're feeling like that out of love, not out of arrogance or some sort of negativity. Or Mother Yashoda, she thinks he's my little boy. And Nanda Maharaj, there's actually a little pastime where one of Nanda Maharaj's brothers, Upananda, calls a meeting of the villagers in Vrindavan, and he says, you know what? I have had a realization about Krishna. My realization is that he is very great. In fact, he is like God. So, Mother Yashoda, you should stop tying him up with rope. And Nanda Maharaj, stop waving your stick at him and shouting at him. And you must all be more respectful towards Krishna because he's very great. He's really very great. And he's very pure. And he is the supreme truth. And this is all true, of course. So yeah, he's the supreme truth. And Nanda Maharaj says, just hang on. Just wait a minute. Just hang on. I know him better than you. You say he's the supreme truth. Let me tell you something about this boy. He's a liar. He's a liar. And he's a thief. How can you say he's the supreme truth? He steals butter every day. He's a criminal in the making. And if you ask him, was it you who stole the butter? He says, no. He's just a liar. So don't tell me he's the supreme truth. And you say he's the supreme powerful. Huh. Whenever there's a thunderstorm at night, he comes running into my bedroom. Daddy, Daddy, I'm frightened. Let me get into your bed with you. So he's not the supreme powerful. He's just my son. And if he does some nonsense, I'll correct him. You see, this is the mood of spontaneous devotional service. Because there's so much love, they forget he's God. And they just see him in terms of their relationships with him. And so Radharani and the gopis, they see him, you could say, like he's their boyfriend in that type of way, out of love. So if you read through those two chapters, 15 and 16 of Nectar of Devotion, it explains all these things. This is spontaneous devotional service. Now, it's very good when we become enthusiastic. Yes, let's do some service. Let's wash the pots. Or something. Let's clean the temple room. Yeah, let's do it. It's not exactly spontaneous devotional service in the sense that we use the term. It's enthusiastic devotional service. It's very nice. There are different terms you can use for it, actually. It's not what we refer to in our tradition as spontaneous devotional service. There's a very significant difference. We should always be very respectful towards Krishna. Very, very respectful. Yes. And worship him. And not like the cowherd boys. They take Krishna to be their friend. and not like, the boss or someone on a much higher level. So, and Krishna, because he loves his devotees so much, when they have competitions, sometimes they have running races, sometimes they have swimming races, sometimes they even wrestle together. And you know what? Because Krishna loves his devotees so much, he always lets his friends win. And therefore, the cowherd boys think Krishna is a loser. And when they have like team games, and there's two leaders of two teams, and they're going to choose from the cowherd boys who will be in their team, no one chooses Krishna. Because they think, why do we want Krishna? He always loses. And in the end, they've chosen everyone. Only Krishna's left. And the one leader says to the other, you want Krishna? And the other one says, no, you can have him. This is spontaneous devotional service based on love. And it's a different thing from just enthusiastic devotional service. For us, enthusiastic devotional service, that's really very good. What does it mean to have a foundational relationship with Prabhupada? How can we in our daily practice develop our relationship with Prabhupada? That's a really good question. That's a really good question. Foundational relationship with Prabhupada, at least the way I would take it, is that it means you understand clearly and you see in these terms that whatever I'm doing, it's all based on the instructions of Prabhupada. Why do I chant my rounds? Because Prabhupada ordered us. Why do I follow the regulative principles? Because Prabhupada ordered us. Why do I read the books? Because Prabhupada ordered us. Why do I come to the programs? Because Prabhupada ordered us. I mean, there may be some other perspective also, that I come to the programs because I like it, I enjoy it. Nice kirtan and so on. But at the root of it all, in the foundation, it's what Prabhupada's given us. So I would say that's what it means to have a foundational relationship with Prabhupada. See that he is underpinning everything that you do in Krishna consciousness. And how can we in our daily practice develop our relationship with Prabhupada? Well, at least one thing you can do is, when you're doing these different things, just remember that, Prabhupada instructed us to do this. And you can even try and find some places where Prabhupada said, for example, how's this? Prabhupada said that, what is it exactly? About cooperation.
Your love for me will be
Oh yeah, your love for me will be shown by how you cooperate together after I've gone, Prabhupada said. Yeah, that's association, isn't it? Yeah. So like that, if when we're doing things, we can remember that, yes, here Prabhupada said to do this. Like, I'll give you an example regarding 16 rounds. One devotee, actually Mother Malati, I know she's been to South Africa, I don't know if any of you saw her some years ago. She asked Prabhupada one time, that Srila Prabhupada, you say that if we just chant 16 rounds a day, follow the regulative principles, and just do some service. We'll go back to Godhead at the end of this life. But Prabhupada, it sounds too easy. It sounds too easy. How could it be so easy? So simple? And Prabhupada, you know what Prabhupada's answer was? Prabhupada said, do you think that I would cheat you? You can remember things like this, and in this way your connection with Prabhupada within your heart will be strengthened. Yesterday we mentioned the 26 qualities of a devotee. Could we please tell some examples of times when Prabhupada demonstrated these qualities? Gosh, you know, he was doing it all the time. He was just doing it all the time. He was tolerating so much. I told you the story last night, right? I told you the devotee who said he couldn't tolerate another devotee. You remember that story? Those of you who were here. This devotee was saying, oh, such and such, some other devotee. Oh, he's like this. He's like that. He is too much. I just can't work with him. And Prabhupada said, try and tolerate him, because he's a devotee. And the devotee said, but Prabhupada, he is like this and that, and he does this and he doesn't do that, and he's too much, and I can't work with him. And Srila Prabhupada said, just try to tolerate him as I tolerate you. Tolerance is one of those 26 qualities. And don't worry, as we mentioned last night, whoever you are, and however nice a devotee you are, there's always going to be one devotee around, at least, who's tolerating you. And Prabhupada was very poetic. You know, if you read his books, the more I read, we're doing Bhakti Vaibhava now, in-depth study of the Bhagavatam. I'm going through the purports, all the purports, the entire thing. And the way he expresses himself, it's just amazing. Very, very, very poetic. And of course, the main quality of a devotee is attachment to Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada was just incredibly attached to Krishna. Why is it that we're always placed in difficulty? Although we try so hard in life, we're not always placed in difficulty. I mean, we all know difficulty does come. Anyway, whether it's always or some of the time or just a little bit of the time or whatever, it's because we're in the material world, that's why. Yeah, and the material world is just a very difficult place. Here we were in Newcastle, having a nice time chanting Hare Krishna and doing so many things. And then suddenly what happened? COVID came. What on earth? Who ever dreamt that some sort of disease like that would come and just take over the entire world? None of us thought that possibility existed. But welcome to the material world. Therefore, we should really try to be Krishna conscious to get out of the material world and tolerate the difficulties and the difficulties and persevere with our Krishna consciousness. How can we begin to appreciate senior Vaishnavas appropriately? Yeah, well, we were just asked about this, the 26 qualities. And I don't know if I suggested last night, but anyway, let me suggest that we should try to learn these qualities, and when we observe the other devotees, we should try to see how they have these qualities, because they do. They do. They're there to be seen. But because we sometimes are prone to be, skeptical of others and not so appreciative, then we may not see those qualities so much. But if you make an effort to observe a devotee in terms of the 26 qualities, then you'll see that actually this devotee, even if he's one of these loud devotees or kind of, slightly pushy devotees, that sort of thing, which may, disturb you a bit. But if you look more carefully, you'll see that actually he really does have this quality and that quality. Dedication in Krishna's service, like that. And that's nice. That's really nice, because then if you can appreciate other devotees, you'll always be happy in their company. But if you see their faults, then you'll always feel, I don't like being in their company. Baladev Vijayabhushan says, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 1, he tells Arjuna, because you're not envious of me, I will tell you the highest truth, basically, the most confidential knowledge. And Baladev Vijayabhushan, one of our great acharyas, he says, envy means you look at a person and you study them and you try to see their faults. And you see their faults and you ignore their good qualities. Yes. Even in the midst of many good qualities, you focus on their faults. He says this is envy. And we mustn't be envious devotees. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. So are we now, we're going to have